The Red Sea wasn't called the Red Sea because it was revolutionary.
That's right.
Revolutionary Sea, but revolutionary is like too long.
When General Secretary Moses led the proletariats through the Red Sea on dry land, I don't know how to finish the sentence, but...
Welcome, comrades, to the art of cinema. I am Colonel T, Minister of Propaganda of the People's Republic of F. I'm joined here in the studio by the namesake of our glorious fatherland, he who tills the soil of the garden of human happiness with the spade of atrocity, General Secretary F.
Emancipated in the name of your glorious leader, General Secretary F, are all those who implement my ideology, Colonel. From here in the underground bunker command center of the People's Liberation Army shall I liberate those who abide by my manifesto. But the counter-revolutionaries shall be put to shame and publicly executed or banished to the Arctic labor camps at my discretion.
So shall you prune the trees of progress, sir, for this is the labor of the revolution.
But if I may speak candidly, Colonel T, sometimes it seems like no matter how many counter-revolutionaries I persecute, I just can't advance society towards the proletarian utopia fast enough. Here I am, hard at work committing atrocities and genocides, but then I look up and it seems I've barely advanced history towards its end and perfected it at all. That's when I have to recommit to the revolution. That's when I must pour the gasoline of fanatical dogmatism onto the brush fire of sedition, Colonel.
Heavy is the burden you bear for the revolution, sir. And that's why we interpret American movies in the name of the revolution here on the Art of Cinema.
That's right. The art of cinema is one of the more effective tools I've devised for proselytizing the people, for converting them into revolutionaries. It's how I show the people that even capitalist imperialist movies reveal the truth of my manifesto. Because my manifesto is the truth about society, Colonel. And since the Americans make movies about society, in spite of themselves, they reveal that my ideology is just and true, whereas their ideology is corrupt and deceitful and fraudulent, frankly.
We're up to number 4 on our list of the top 10 films of the 2010s, and at number 4 is Moneyball, the Brad Pitt baseball movie. The film tells us the story of Brad Pitt's failed career as a Major League Baseball player in a series of flashbacks. So let's begin our analysis of Moneyball with that backstory. While he was a high school player, Brad Pitt came to the attention of professional baseball scouts. He received an offer from the New York Mets. The scouts told Brad Pitt that they considered him to be an elite 5-tool player. The scouts thought that he'd eventually play as the starting center fielder for the Mets. But Brad Pitt also had a full baseball scholarship offer from Stanford University, and he'd have to pass on it to accept the contract to play for the Mets.
So it's exactly as I would have predicted. The forces of baseball production have been concentrated in the hands of a few Mets scouts and managers, but the great masses of Mets baseball players, such as Brad Pitt, are falling more and more into the proletariat. The situation of Brad Pitt and the other Mets baseball players becomes wretched and intolerable in proportion to the increasing wealth of the Mets scouts and management.
So, with the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to become a Major League Baseball player before him then, Brad Pitt turns down the scholarship offer from Stanford and signs with the New York Mets. But Brad Pitt's baseball career doesn't work out as he and his scouts had planned, sir. Brad Pitt gets cut from the Mets roster, and after that he has a journeyman career in professional baseball. He gets traded around to different organizations, playing in the minor leagues and for lower-tier major league teams. And try as he might, Brad Pitt can't hit the curveball, sir. After several seasons of this, Brad Pitt finally admits that as a professional baseball player, he's failed.
But except that he hasn't failed.
No?
The problem isn't with Brad Pitt, Colonel. The problem is that Major League Baseball is run by counter-revolutionaries.
Oh, fucking counter-revolutionaries.
Yeah, I know. We must bring the revolution to Major League Baseball. We must install revolutionaries to replace systems that exclude Brad Pitt and the other proletarian baseball players from the position of wealth and privilege enjoyed by the bourgeoisie scouts and managers with revolutionary new systems that are inclusive of players who can't hit the curveball. You see, the curveball is merely a socially constructed dialectical power dynamic designed to exclude the Mets baseball players from the position of wealth and privilege enjoyed by the scouts, managers, and owners.
Brad Pitt resigns as a player and goes to work as a scout for the Oakland A's. Eventually, Brad Pitt becomes the general manager of the A's. The general manager's job is to hire the personnel for a baseball team, the players, the coaches, the scouts.
Now, that's interesting. So Brad Pitt infiltrates the ranks of the very bourgeoisie managers who held him down as a proletarian player.
Right.
Will Brad Pitt bring the revolution to professional baseball? Is Brad Pitt the expectation of the major league teams?
So Brad Pitt is the general manager of the Oakland A's, but the A's can't win the World Series. At the start of the film, the A's have made it to the American League Division Series in 2001, and they're playing the New York Yankees. But the Yankees have an enormous advantage over the A's. The Yankees' payroll is $115 million, but the A's, playing in a much smaller market, can only afford $40 million of payroll.
Oakland A's. What does that stand for? Proletariat or... That word doesn't even start with A. Well, it's not the Oakland F's. Well, let me say as an aside that I appreciate that they've named their team just a letter. Really, for the economy of speech, you don't need anything more than one letter to identify a thing.
So the A's come close, but they can't beat the Yankees, who win the division series and go on to lose to the Diamondbacks in the World Series that year. And remember, sir, these are the 2001 baseball playoffs that were played just weeks after the September 11th terrorist attacks. So way to go, New York Yankees. You lost in the playoffs when your city really needed you. When the people needed you most, you failed them.
Yeah, New York Yankees. More like New York bourgeoisie.
In the offseason, after the A's get eliminated in the postseason, the contracts of their major stars expire. Johnny Damon, Jason Giambi, and Jason Isringhausen are all free agents, and the A's can't afford to sign them to new contracts. So how will Brad Pitt be able to assemble a competitive team for the 2002 season?
Well, he could threaten them with 10 years hard labor in the Arctic labor camps, Colonel. And if that doesn't work, show trial and public execution.
Brad Pitt goes to visit the Cleveland Indians general manager to try to trade for new players. He doesn't have the money to come away with any of the players he's really looking for, but while he's there, he notices Jonah Hill, a young analyst working for the Indians management. Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill have a conversation out in the parking garage where no one can hear them, and Jonah Hill explains to Brad Pitt that the people running Major League Baseball teams have no idea what they're doing. Jonah Hill says that if general managers would assemble their rosters according to the tools of statistical analysis that he uses, they'd be able to put competitive teams together without needing to pay big money to the top free agents.
So Jonah Hill has secretly written the Major League Baseball Manifesto. Mm-hmm. Colonel, this movie is exactly following the playlist of revolution and atrocity. But how will Jonah Hill wrest power away from the corrupt, exploitative Major League Baseball management so as to implement his revolution?
After he gets back home to Oakland, Brad Pitt calls Jonah Hill and asks him if, had he been working for the Mets front office, he would have drafted Brad Pitt in the first round like the Mets scouts who in fact recruited him. But Jonah Hill tells Brad Pitt that no, he wouldn't have drafted him until the 9th round. And he expects that Brad Pitt would then have turned down the Mets' offer and taken the scholarship to Stanford. Brad Pitt is impressed by Jonah Hill's blunt honesty, so he hires him to be the assistant general manager for the A's.
Jonah Hill and Brad Pitt join forces to lead a People's Liberation Army in Major League Baseball.
Viva la revolution! Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill assemble an unconventional roster of players for the 2002 Oakland A's on the cheap, using Jonah Hill's innovative tools of statistical analysis. For example, they hire Chris Pratt to play first base, even though he's never played first base, and none of the scouts or coaches think he's up to the task. They make similar moves at other positions, concentrating exclusively on these players' on-base percentage.
Solid math.
Chris Pratt and the other new players aren't stars. They won't get a lot of extra base hits, they won't hit many home runs, and they can't field their positions well. But they'll get on base as often as the star players who have left. And in theory, this will mean that the A's will still be able to compete with the big market teams and their star-studded lineups.
The Jonah Hill Manifesto is going to work.
It's going to work.
Chris Pratt and the other new unconventional players are the proletariat of the Oakland A's. And remember, the proletariat will become hyper-productive after the revolution. Once the proletariat sees the means of baseball production, they won't be corrupted by ownership of it like the bourgeoisie were. The Chris Pratt-led proletariat will become so hyper-productive, in fact, that competition will become obsolete and the utopia will be ushered in. But this is a point at which I expect the corrupt capitalist imperialist A's management to implement its conspiracy against Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill.
As always, your predictions are accurate, sir. This new strategy Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill are using to choose players threatens and frustrates the old-school baseball establishment. Brad Pitt is basically ignoring the advice of his scouts about which players the A's ought to draft. Guess who the head coach of the Oakland A's is, sir?
Who? Oh, is it Vince Vaughn?
No, it's not Vince Vaughn, sir.
Is it the other guy in is it Robert Duvall?
That's a good guess, but the head coach is in fact Philip Seymour Hoffman. And Philip Seymour Hoffman won't cooperate with Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill's revolutionary plan for the team. It doesn't make any sense to Philip Seymour Hoffman, so he resists. He won't put Chris Pratt in the lineup at first base, for example. So the A's are doing very badly early in the 2002 season. It looks like Brad Pitt's revolution isn't going to work at all.
Brad Pitt's going to need to deal with Coach Philip Seymour Hoffman the same way I have to deal with the American military, Colonel.
Oh, of course.
Should Philip Seymour Hoffman dare to defy the revolution, Brad Pitt must annihilate him and the scouts to the last man, that none of them survive to sign the instrument of surrender.
May Brad Pitt water his garden with the blood of the counter-revolutionaries, sir.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
By mid-season, Brad Pitt's revolution in Oakland A's baseball is going so badly that he understands his job to be on the line. He has to meet with the owner to explain that he thinks the team is going to turn things around in time to make it to the postseason. Coach Philip Seymour Hoffman and the scouts are openly hostile with Brad Pitt. The players on the team don't trust him. So Brad Pitt doubles down. He trades other players away so that Coach Philip Seymour Hoffman has no choice but to start Chris Pratt at first base. He starts coaching the players himself, explaining his baseball philosophy to them.
Yeah, I would have used a lot more violence to get my way, but then again, I can cut down tens of millions of counter-revolutionaries here in the People's Republic of F.
Right.
And there's still tens of millions left to do the work of the revolution. On a baseball team, there's 75, 100 guys?
Right.
Who knows? So Brad Pitt can't use genocide as freely as I would. We're taking what we've learned from evolution and applying it. Culling the herd.
And wouldn't you know it, General Secretary, the A's go on a winning streak.
Yes!
They win 19 games in a row, tying the record for most consecutive games won in a season in the American League. If they win the next game, Brad Pitt's 2002 Oakland A's will break the record. But Brad Pitt doesn't attend his own team's games, sir.
But why?
Brad Pitt considers himself a loser in life, and he thinks that he'll jinx his team if he attends the game. The A's are beating the Kansas City Royals 11-0, though, so they're in a lock to break the record for most consecutive games won in a season in the American League. Brad Pitt drives over to the stadium to watch then, but as soon as he shows up, the Royals start to score. They eventually tie the score, 11-11. It looks like Brad Pitt is a vessel of bad luck, sir, a repository of loss and shame. But then, Coach Philip Seymour Hoffman puts Chris Pratt in the game as a pinch hitter. Chris Pratt goes up to bat and hits a home run to win the game. The A's have won 20 games in a row, breaking the record, sir. Brad Pitt is vindicated.
You know, in PRF baseball, we don't allow the players and teams to collect runs at all. All runs scored belong to the workers, Colonel. Because runs scored is the baseball form of profit, and profit is theft.
Of course I knew that, sir.
Even when the baseball players add value to the game in the form of runs, it is theft for that team to own the profit and to keep all of those runs for themselves. So in PRF baseball, the score of the last game wouldn't have just been A's 12, Royals 11. The score would have been Workers and Soldiers 23, Counter-Revolutionaries 0.
Of course.
So that's exactly as I predicted, Colonel. Competition has become obsolete in PRF baseball.
But, sir, Brad Pitt knows that if the A's don't win the World Series, the regressive, capitalist-imperialist baseball establishment will dismiss the ingenious, revolutionary baseball manifesto that he and Jonah Hill have devised. So in the end, though the A's make it to the first round of the playoffs, they lose to the Twins and are eliminated. Brad Pitt is devastated. He's failed once again. The Boston Red Sox offer him an enormous salary to be their general manager because they're so impressed by the team he put together for so little money. But Brad Pitt doesn't care about money, sir. He only cares about the Oakland A's winning the World Series, and he's failed at this goal once again.
What did I tell you, Brad Pitt? I believe I said you must annihilate Philip Seymour Hoffman and the scouts to the last man so that none of them will be able to survive and sign the instrument of surrender.
Right.
The revolution must be taken by force.
There's no triumph at the end of the film for Brad Pitt, sir. Moneyball is a film about a man who's failed at everything he's tried in life. He failed in both of his careers. He failed in his marriage. But then, after he's over the hill, after society would say that it's too late for Brad Pitt, he brings the revolution to Major League Baseball. Another thread in the story involves Brad Pitt's high school-aged daughter. His daughter is a songwriter. She sings songs about believing in yourself, sir, and at the end of the film, Brad Pitt decides she's right.
But she's not quite right, Colonel.
Oh.
It's not about believing in yourself. It's about believing in the revolution.
Oh, of course.
No sacrifice is too great. No cost in human lives is too high if that sacrifice is made in the name of the revolution to advance the principles of your manifesto.
Naturally.
I trust you all have one. Brad Pitt proves that in Moneyball. A baseball team doesn't need scouts. It doesn't need a head coach. It doesn't even need players who know how to play their positions. All the team needs is a fanatical ideologue who continues to advance failing strategies further and further until they finally start working. Here's what it all comes down to, Colonel T. They'll tell you that the team colors of the Oakland A's are green and yellow, but they'll be lying. The Oakland A's are red, and the red A's must take to the field of battle and strike down the white A's until the last man falls.
Of course. Moneyball exaggerates and distorts the importance of the advanced tools of statistical analysis that Jonah Hill and Brad Pitt champion. The story comes from a writer named Michael Lewis, who's made a career writing sensational exposés about different American industries. To make these exposés dramatic, Lewis tends towards a simplified, univariate analysis, sir.
Univariate analysis? Is there any other kind?
Lewis's stories tend to portray their heroes as a small group of enlightened outsiders who are the only ones who can see the simple, obvious truth that's the key to the industries they work in. But the antagonists in Michael Lewis stories can't see these simple, obvious truths because they're either stupid or evil.
Or they're stupid and evil.
Like the Americans?
Well, maybe not that stupid.
Like in most movies attempting to dramatize real life, Moneyball gets a lot of the facts wrong so as to allow for a good story, so as to present us with heroes to root for and villains to despise. The advanced statistical hacking of baseball has allowed managers to control the game in ways that players and coaches can't, but it's also produced an extremely boring game. In the years since 2002, as these principles have been pressed farther and farther, we've seen the league batting average plummet. We've seen way too many pitchers brought out of the bullpen for each game by statisticians like Jonah Hill, where it would be much more enjoyable, more sporting for the players and fans to leave pitchers in longer and let them compete.
Yeah.
So you can't look at the employment of these advanced statistical tools in Major League Baseball over the past 20 years as the ingenious breakthrough that Moneyball claims it to be. But it's a small flaw. This is the best baseball movie I've seen. It edges Billy Crystal's film 61, which is about the 1961 home run race between Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle. And while one of my pet peeves about sports and music movies is that the actors usually don't look like they're really playing their game or their instrument, Chris Pratt and the other actors here do a near-perfect job of simulating baseball. In short, sir, this is a movie to make grown men cry.
You know what else makes grown men cry?
What's that?
Enhanced extermination techniques.
Oh, you mean genocide?
It only makes you cry if you're not fully committed to the revolution. Brad Pitt, on the other hand, understands that socialism must be achieved at all costs because socialism leads to communism, and it is communism that opens the way to the politics of atrocity that is the final, consummate stage of progress.
Excellent.
Write this down, workers and soldiers of the PRF. Atrocity is the life force of the utopia. That's what it says on Brad Pitt's t-shirt because Brad Pitt understands the truth. Brad Pitt understands that no cost in human lives is too high. Brad Pitt understands that the revolution must be taken by force. Brad Pitt understands that the bourgeoisie isn't just going to voluntarily relinquish its ill-gotten gains. Brad Pitt himself will tell you that if you own any private property, you must understand that the physical harm done to you by the party is necessary. It's simply the collateral damage of the redistribution of your assets to the poor. If the property owners attempt to avoid having their property seized and redistributed, torture is the appropriate response. And it might well be Brad Pitt himself who will torture you. Let me speak directly to the workers here, Colonel. Workers and soldiers of the PRF. Just because I'm a genocidal maniac doesn't mean I don't care about you.
Workers and soldiers of the People's Republic of F, Moneyball is number 4 on our list of the 10 best movies of the 2010s. This has been The Art of Cinema with our glorious leader, General Secretary F. Let us maintain vigilance against the ever-looming threat of an American invasion. You are required to report any non-participation or dissent amongst your comrades. But don't forget to tune into The Art of Cinema again next time to find out which film from the 2010s is ranked at number 3 in your next mandatory re-education session.